Hello, everyone, and welcome to Riverside Theatre's Backstage Chat, a podcast where we get to talk to some of the talented artisans who work on our shows. Led by producing artistic director Alan D. Cornell and managing director John R. Moses, Riverside Theatre is the only professional theater on Florida's Treasure Coast. Today, we are thrilled to speak with Greg Santos, managing producer of the Gingold Theatrical Group in New York City, and the director of Riverside's Dollar Quartet, the first show of the 23-24 season, which plays Riverside from October 24th through November 12th. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you for having me.
This is your first time at Riverside, so why don't you give our audiences a little background info on you?
Sure. I grew up on the East Coast in Massachusetts, and when I was in high school, my parents moved to Arizona. And of course I went along because I was just in high school. And then as soon as I could leave, I moved to New York City. And I've been there for almost 30 years.
Amazing. Growing up in Massachusetts, going to Arizona, that's a
It was culture shock.
change.
It was a big culture shock. It ultimately was a great thing because I lived in a wonderful town in Massachusetts, and the educational system was fantastic, but the theater was 70 years old. You know, all the equipment was from the 40s and 50s. I went to school in the 80s and 90s. And so when we moved to Arizona, everything was new because it was Arizona.
Right.
So I went to a high school that maybe didn't have Latin 4, which I had been taking in Massachusetts, but they had a state-of-the-art theater. So I got to learn, looking back, hindsight of course, I realize how beneficial that was to setting me up to succeed all these years later. But at the time, you know, I didn't want to go to Arizona. I wanted to stay in Massachusetts. I was an East Coast boy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But artistically, it opened up things that I just wouldn't have had access to in Massachusetts.
So at what age did you sort of get into the theater program?
I was a child actor. I apologize in advance. That was my intention when I moved to New York. After high school, I didn't go to college. I went to college for about 5 minutes, and then I moved to New York, and I started auditioning, and I was an actor, and I had some success in other cities, and I thought, New York's where I want to be, New York's what I want to do, and the hubris of youth and 19 years old, and I went, and I got called back a few times. You know, it was very positive feedback, but I'd be in a callback room, and it would be 21-year-old me standing next to a 40-year-old person and a 45-year-old person. It was lovely that they wanted to see my work again, but I was cognizant enough, even at that young age, to realize, they're not going to hire me for the job. They're going to hire an appropriately aged character person to play this job. So I thought, maybe acting's not the thing. And I realized, after having been a pretty serious young actor, that I hadn't kind of had a life, that I hadn't learned how to be an adult person in the world. And so once I made that freedom, when I gave myself that freedom of saying, the acting thing's not going to be right now for you here in New York, I got to learn how to be an adult and enjoy the city and learn how to be by myself. All the things that you should learn before you head into adulthood that I hadn't learned because I was too busy in the theater. So I took a few years off of everything and, you know, worked 3 jobs, early New York City days, and I ended up picking up a job as a doorman, a bouncer, at Rosa's Turn, a piano bar in the West Village, and with a singing staff, and it was very, very popular. And I started, after about 6 months of that, I started doing a set at 2 o'clock. I'd do a late night set at 2 a.m. So I'd sing a few songs and, you know, say a few jokes. And so that brought me...
Are you a musician as well?
No, a singer. You know, It was a piano bar, so there was someone playing. So after I did that, it made me realize, okay, this is something that I've woefully missed in my life, being an artist. And I still didn't know if acting was the thing, so I started doing some stage management and some event work. And then that quickly came into being a director. And for many years, for almost 10 years, I was an associate director for Hunter Foster, who is a rather well-known Broadway actor and director. And I have traveled all over the country with him and setting his shows, and that's really what put me on this path to be talking to you today.
Well, Jen Cody, his wife, has been here a couple of times.
And she sent me a picture last night and said, enjoy that pool. She's one of my great friends. We've been friends for a dozen years.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So obviously, in the years that you were off, you still had that sort of fire within you.
Yes. I've always been a fan, you know, and it's it's sometimes a difficult thing to reconcile. Do I love this, or should I do this? That was kind of the quandary, because I did love it so much. And just working in that silly piano bar and being back in that kind of performance energy really made me say, yeah, this is where this is where I am. Yeah, this is where I should be.
And then how did you sort of develop into directing? I mean, you've directed all over the country. You've directed some amazing projects with some wonderful theaters. Obviously, you have an eye or sort of the ability to corral talent and have them do what you envision them to do.
I think that it's... I sometimes make a joke that, they don't pay me to direct, they pay me to travel and use weird pillows. But I think that there's a few avenues on that highway that I think that I communicate well with people in a direct and clear way. I also value artists, and if I came into a room and said, this is what we're going to do, this is what I've decided, that doesn't enrich anyone's lives. That just is an exercise in ego or hubris for me. So I make a point to run an open room that we're all... I said to them this morning in our first morning rehearsal, I said, listen, there's no bad ideas. I'm going to make the decisions, but there's no bad ideas. We're making something. Everyone should have some skin in the game. And I think being a young person performer and having such respect for the theater and being in awe of it all, that I really, in a way that I don't think I appreciated until I became a proper director, was downloading logistics in my brain and was, how is this navigated? Oh, look how that choreographer is talking to that dancer. Those are all things that I soaked up like a sponge, just tacitly watching from the background. So I think that stuff has served me very well. So I think it's communication. I also love actors, and I think actors like that. They get that vibe. Nothing makes me more thrilled than to see talented people do what they were meant to do. So I think it's communication. I think it's love of the craft and love of the people in it. And that for me, and the life that I want to lead and the ideals and the morals and my fabric of my life, I think that art and making art and having people watch the art that you made is how we change minds and how we change society. And again, and not in an active way maybe, but in a way of showing somebody else's story, a perspective from someone else that you didn't see. That's how progress is made. And so I know maybe not in $1 Million Quartet we're not solving the riddles of the universe, or we're not moving goalposts forward, but I make a point to tell an honest story with honest emotions and honest relationships on stage. And I think that's our job as artists in society.
Well, there's something special about live performances. I mean, each performance is different for every day because you have different audiences and you have different energy.
Yeah.
But it's a community coming together and sharing something special.
Absolutely.
And hopefully the performers get the energy from the audience and vice versa.
Absolutely.
So the director, you in this case, has to factor all these other little bits to make this performance live on stage. I don't know if you give actors or actresses sort of points like, well, you should expect a reaction at this point or something.
Well, I don't think we've said yet, this is my 11th time at the $1 Million Quartet dance. I was Hunter's associate, like I said, for a lot of years and set his production, and I've done many by myself in the last few years. And so I'm well versed in the piece. I understand how it works. I understand the flow of it. I know where the 5 solid jokes are in it. So I do have those conversations. And we should never expect anything on stage, and good actors know that. But I can let them know that this will probably be the reaction you'll get to this moment. I say a lot to actors, and they seem to like it. I say, well, from the front, it looks like. Because I think that that's the disconnect sometimes, that you think you're playing X, but from the front, it sure looks like Y. So I don't want to get into your brain because you're an artist and I want you to make those connections yourself, but I can tell you that from the front, where I'm sitting, this is what it looks like is happening. And I think that that's pretty helpful to let people focus in on the points that we're trying to make.
Well, having directed this show 11 times, how do you keep it fresh for you?
Sure. Well, I approach every single one as its own thing. So I told them today when I met with them for the first time, I will never say, what did we do last time? I use a lot of the same actors. Mm-hmm. In this production, there's 4 actors that I've worked with a lot. A few of them are my friends in real life that we've been together, for the last 10 years in shows. So I am cognizant of making everyone's experience an experience for the first time. That's what we want the audience to have. And I know that, I forgot my pad downstairs, but I had written down, there's one of our guys this is his 18th production. One, it's his 12th production. One, it's his 11th production. And listen, we all like money. Who doesn't like money? But we wouldn't go back to this if there wasn't some kernel of satisfaction in the middle of it. And so I make a point to everyone is a different experience. Everyone, the set looks different. We design the set for every theater that I'm at. It's not always the same cast, so there's different energy. We have a few people in this production who have never done it before, 2 actors. So they deserve to have the same artistic experience that we had when we all did it our first time. So we make sure that we give value to all of that so that we all can come to the same place together. I think of MDQ as the story of a family. And I think that, for me, that's the way that I approach it, that it's a breakdown of a family unit. And I make a point to make sure that my companies are families. We're at work, don't get me wrong.
Right.
It's not puppies and kittens, and we don't all have to be friends all the time, but we have to have genuine affection for each other as we're making this thing.
It will definitely come off the stage.
It absolutely does.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked about $1 Million Quartet, but for those who might not know what the show is about, it's about one iconic day.
Yes.
Can you fill in the rest?
Absolutely. So Sam Phillips of Sun Records, who was one of the first people to record Elvis, and Carl Perkins came from Sun Records, and the first few Johnny Cash albums came from Sun Records, and Jerry Lee Lewis, for the purposes of our play, had just one single out, and it was an actual thing that actually happened. I think that's where the reality stops, and then it becomes a theatrical play. But that for one moment in time, he got those 4 guys in a room together into his studio and was smart enough to hit record in that booth. There's a real recording. You can get the album that it's not very entertaining, to be honest. The album that's just the songs is great, but there's a version of just when he hit record, so you can hear all the discussions that they're having during it all. And I don't think, and Sam talks about it in the play. I don't know that, although he was an impresario and an amazing maker of art and music, I don't know that he could appreciate what happened that night. That was, and it was the first and only time that anyone that we all know now that they were all together.
He was smart enough to hit record. He was smart enough to get a newspaper to come and take a photo,
Yep.
but he probably didn't realize how much those performers, at least that night, would change music history.
100%. Well, and how can you? I mean, if you break down what Sam did musically as like a single kind of fella from the South, running his own place, and he built that studio and he hung those tiles. How could anybody? I mean, I'm jumping now, but this is why $1 Million Quartet works, because you like one of those 4 people.
Right.
Everybody likes Elvis or Carl or Johnny or Jerry. You have affection for one of those artists, so that he invented, I'm using air quotes, but that he put those 4 people on their paths is pretty spectacular.
Amazing.
It's spectacular, and I don't know that anyone could have the wherewithal to appreciate in the moment what they were doing.
That's just great. And
Yeah.
you mentioned Carl Perkins, Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis just starting out.
Had just started.
Johnny Cash.
Jerry Lee, I think, in 1956, December 4th, 1956, which is the night that happened, I think Jerry Lee was just 21 years old. Johnny was 23. Carl was 24. Elvis was 21 or 22. Everyone was and Sam was only 36. So at that moment, and he had risen to this, he was 36 years old. They were all relatively young men. And it's important that I think, for my purposes as a director and as an artist, I only care about these fellas on December 4th, 1956. Mm-hmm. They all had problematic moments in their lives later on. That's not what the stories that we're telling. We're talking about the artists on this very specific moment in time, this one evening.
Commemorating that specific night.
Correct.
And the great music that was
Correct.
recorded, that was played, that was made all these performers even more famous later on.
Yes. Well, and I think it's, we mentioned it a little bit in the play, you know, popular rock and roll R&B music owes its self to people of color and the African American community. And I think Million Dollar Quartet does a great job of threading that needle to respectfully say they all have a moment where they give deference to the people of color who taught them to do what they're doing.
Absolutely. So why do you think that, obviously the show has been very popular and it resonates with so many people, why do you think, is it just because it's the Elvis Presley on stage? Is it just because of music?
I think obviously those are the load-bearing walls in the room, you know, that those tunes are so solid. And like I said, I dare you to ask 4 people, someone likes one of those 4 guys, everyone. But I think from sitting in the back of the theater for now probably hundreds of performances I've seen over the years, that there is a tangible, you can feel it in the room, sense, memory, nostalgia factor, because all of these songs are not just classic songs, but they're the songs of proms and weddings and celebrations of our lives. So you see an older couple shuffle to their seat at the beginning of the play, and then halfway through I got goosebumps just telling this, halfway through the play someone puts their arm around each other, and then in the finale concert they're standing up and dancing with each other in the aisle. And that's pretty spectacular that we can do that in a night. But I think it really fires off sense memories of first kisses in the backseat of a car, of proms, of weddings, of all those squishy feeling times of life. And I think that's one of the spokes or the tenets of its popularity.
Well, what theater can do is give people an experience that they can't get anywhere else.
Absolutely.
And bring back those memories that might have been long forgotten, but they're brought back to the forefront. So it's amazing, like you mentioned, those who are of an older generation who remember this music when it first came out and what they were doing or how it affected them when it first came out. So
I come from a large, half of my mother is Italian, and so a large Italian family and many aunts and cousins. And one of my aunts was an Elvis fanatic in the early 60s. And I asked her when I got this job many years ago, I said, I'm doing this thing and Elvis is in it. Could you tell me about it? And tell me about going to a concert. And she said, I really don't remember anything, Gregory. I screamed so hard. I almost passed out. She goes, I remember it smelled like pee. Like that people were just so excited. And she said it's something that she wishes she had memories of, but she recognized at that moment that it was a change in her life. Do you know that her life was never going to be the same again after she had heard Elvis's music? And that's a huge thing to culturally, for any artist to be able to do. But, you know, and Elvis obviously has the heaviest lifting job in the play because everybody knows who Elvis is. Nobody knows.
They have their preconceived notions
100%.
of what he did, where he ended up, and all that sort of
So
thing.
he's got to sound a little bit like him and look like him a little in more ways. No one knows what Carl Perkins looks like.
True.
You know, so Carl's got it a little bit easier because you know Carl's songs, absolutely, but you don't know Carl. And everybody knows Johnny, but you know Johnny because of that voice, so you got to have that voice. But yeah, I think Elvis is the hardest assignment in the play because everybody has an Elvis opinion.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Is there anything special that you'd like the audience to leave the theater feeling or you know, enjoying?
This is truly an entertainment, and I produce plays in New York City off Broadway, and I work at lots of different theaters, and it's not always just an entertainment. Sometimes I'm trying to sell a message to you, or I'm trying to sell an ideal to you, or I'm trying to bring you to a new kind of thinking, and that's what art should do, but that's not what this exercise is. This exercise is to understand these men at that moment in time that night, to appreciate the rich relationships and history that they had together, and then if you don't stand up in the concert at the end, I'm going to be mad. That it's a party. We're having a party. And it's dance in the aisles time. I want people to leave not worrying about what they walked in worrying about. And then we've succeeded.
Escaping.
Yeah, we've succeeded if we can do that.
Before we let you go, the Gingold Group.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about it.
It's a fantastic company. I think it's in its 19th year now. I came aboard right as the pandemic was winding down. Every year off Broadway, we do a full production of a George Bernard Shaw play, and then tons of ancillary readings and events. The founder of the company, David Stoller, who's the producing artistic director and my boss, is truly a great man of the theater, but the company's mission statement is very chock full of equity and equality, and that's really what attracted me to the job, was to produce theater in that way, thinking about the greater good, and thinking about the actors' greater good, and that making sure that the voices that aren't represented are represented. So it's a lovely escape from the madness of going around the country and directing things, to go sit at a desk and push papers and spreadsheets, which I know you understand.
And you have your own pillows.
Yes, that's right. That I can sleep in my apartment at night when I go there. But yeah, it's a wonderful company to work for, and really the ideals of equity and equality are really what attracted me to it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
We're so grateful that you're the first
The guinea
guest
pig.
for the Riverside Theater podcast. First time in Vero, first time at Riverside,
It
but
is.
I know this will not be the last.
Thank you. You have to know that I know everyone, a lot of people in show business. I've been in show business for a long time. Riverside Theater is talked about so well amongst us in quiet moments that I got so many messages from friends that have worked here that said, you're going to have a great time, or the housing is wonderful, the people are kind. All the things. I've been in show business so long, I joke, I don't really remember the jobs anymore. I remember the housing and how nice you were to me. But you should know that Riverside is spoken so well of in the circles that I travel in.
That's great. Well, you're a Riverside family.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
And I'll let you get back to directing.
Thank you. Please come see Dollar Quartet.
Please do. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Until next time, this is Oscar Sales for Riverside Theater's Backstage Chat.